It's great to be with you. I'm the Executive Director of the Methodist Trust Association, which is the investment and property arm of the Methodist Church of New Zealand. I look after their investments and their property, which includes their insurance portfolio, which was a really cushy job several years ago and is no longer quite as pleasant as it was. Given where we are, I bring to this meeting the greetings from the President and the General Secretary of the Methodist Church, Reverend Rex Nathan and Reverend David Bush, and they are very delighted that we have the opportunity of meeting in an ecumenical setting and discussion. The meeting that Dave referred to was a meeting of the All Churches Risk Bureau, and Don Baskerville will talk later about that group, but I really commend the idea of cross-denominational meetings, because in the end the issues that we're dealing with at the administration level transcend any differences that there may be at a theological level or denominational level, and this is a really great place for us to start. Crossroads means that you're on a journey, and it means you start from somewhere, and I think I have to tell you that where we're starting from today compares to a meeting very similar to this in Picton 3 weeks ago, when I was speaking to the Nelson Marlborough Synod of the Methodist Church, and I was halfway through my presentation and one of the really good solid shock waves went through and everybody stopped and they didn't care about me very much after that, and the minister in charge of the meeting got up and just let the group know how important I was, because I could bring props of that nature into my presentation. I will try and not do that today unless it's really, really important. If I don't think you're paying attention, I will just sort of click my fingers. But all journeys start from somewhere. Pre-September and February 2011, in Canterbury, we were pretty confident, the head office for the Methodist Church is in Christchurch, we were pretty confident that the insurance earthquake risk was somewhere else, here basically. We knew that Christchurch was not really on the map for seismic activity. We knew that it would come through Wellington and the Wairarapa. As a property owner and as an owner of largely historic properties, we were waiting for the local authority, the Christchurch City Council, to work out what its earthquake-prone seismic building policy was going to be, and we would then react to that, and we would carry out the requirements that gave us. We were particularly concerned, and I'll come back to this later in the presentation, about the obligations that fall upon you when you are the owner of a listed historic property. The strengthening questions when you've got HPT involved or local authority registration make life much, much more difficult. Pre the earthquakes, we also believed that the most expensive loss you could have was the loss of your building. I have to tell you that is not the most expensive loss you can have, especially if it's listed. The most expensive loss is the loss where it hasn't quite fallen down and they expect you to put it back. We've got one property at the moment in Kaiapoi. It's a 1910 triple brick exterior walled parsonage, vicarage. The walls internally are double brick, they're all structural. The economic case is that it must be replaced, and the replacement cost is about $630,000. The repair cost is $960,000, and Historic Places Trust are expecting us to repair it. We've said no, we will replace it. At the moment, we are not in any way, shape or form in any common ground with them. We think about it like a shark's fin. The shark is under the water, but the fin is the evidence, and it's that cost escalation. So and I know that you've listed property here, so that is a major problem. So we were pretty comfortable before the earthquake Post-February 2011, we suffered 3 people killed in one of our churches. They were removing the organ, and the building collapsed and killed them. That gives us probably, I think, a more poignant position, and also a different starting point from a lot of property owners. We suffered the loss either through destruction or very significant damage of 6 churches, 5 halls and 2 parsonages, and I'll come on to EQC later. We suffered moderate damage to 24 properties that made them basically unusable, but they were fixable. Paint and paper, bit of plaster, a little bit of building work. We also lost the access to our head office in Latimer Square in Christchurch. And that really became a major exercise for us, because all of our records were in head office. It was accessible in terms of the building itself, but it was behind the cordon, and it remained behind the cordon for 15 months. We desperately needed to get our computers out. We backed them up, but for reasons that I won't bother going into, the backups, it actually didn't produce anything. And we needed them out, and we needed them out urgently. And a friend of mine's son-in-law was a builder with a pass into the cordon. And I said to him, look, we'll go into Latimer Square, I'll go in my overalls, and I'll be your labourer. You go out the front and board up the windows and do useful things, and I'll shovel computers out the back door into your van. And he was a game young fella. So in we went. And I also took my secretary's car keys with me because she'd left her car there, and I thought I'll get that out for her. So we had a really fruitful afternoon. He was out there boarding up the windows, and I was out the back shoveling computers into the van. And we came to go, and we had overstayed our welcome because they'd shut all the gates. And we couldn't get out. We ended up being picked up by a police patrol who thought that we were looters. And quite properly so. There were 2 scruffy guys in overalls with a truckload of computers in the back. Fortunately, we talked our way out of it. I got my driver's licence and my business card, and they put the 2 things together and thought it was probably kosher. And they took us out, but they warned if they ever saw us in there again, we wouldn't be getting out, and we'd be hard full under one of the buildings. So you learn different things, and this is what Dave was talking about. You know, you react in different ways, but we got our computers out and we were able to start up a new office, and we're currently living 20 of us in a 4-bedroomed house out by the university. Myself, the General Secretary, and one of our accountants are the only people who share a bedroom with their PA or secretary, and have done for 2 years, and our wives don't mind. It hasn't progressed to any great stage, I have to admit, but still. So we got to the road to recovery. We made a decision very early in the piece that we would manage all of the church claims centrally. We took the view, rightly or wrongly, that the parishes did not have the expertise in each individual parish to manage the claim. We ensure centrally, we thought we would do the claim centrally. We decided that we would do the easy properties first. We'd do the paint and paper. We would get as many buildings open again, as many people into them as we could, runs on the board. We thought it gave us credibility with the church if we could get those 24 buildings that were knocked around but not badly damaged open again and get them going. We ended up letting one contract to a reasonably good sized building firm over 26 properties over 7 months. And at the end of the 7 months, we had those 26 properties up, open and going. That left all the difficult ones sitting in a pile or to one side where we didn't make progress. We didn't make progress for a long period of time, but the church at least knew that something had happened. And we thought that was important, that we actually get those runs on the board, that people knew that we actually could achieve something. The other thing that was very important was regular contact with the church. We sent out newsletters, originally 2 weekly, then monthly, weekly, then 2 weekly, then monthly, and we said what had happened. Where it was good, we highlighted that. Where it hadn't worked well, we also highlighted that, because there is no point trying to pretend something isn't happening. The church, I'm sure the diocese is the same, everybody talks to everybody else, and we had to be quite open as to what was happening. But keeping that communication going was hugely important. And we reported to the whole of what we call the connection, the whole of the Methodist Church throughout New Zealand, because whilst the activities were based in Greater Christchurch, the interest was throughout the country. And in fact, we were sending copies of these off to the Uniting Church in Australia and to the Methodist Church in England, because they were also interested in what was happening. We constantly reviewed our claim. This was really quite an eye-opener to us. We, after September, were pretty confident that we'd sorted it out, and then February came and we were confident we sorted it out. And we thought we had a claim in June 2011 that was about $15 million. We finally settled at 43.5 plus GST. That claim just grew exponentially as we got into our buildings and we found out the level of damage. So you didn't want to sign off too quickly, because until you've really got into your buildings, you're not quite sure what the damage is going to be. The other thing that we found really important on the road to recovery was the relationships that we'd built up. We relied upon our insurance consultants, who are Marsh in our case, and we told them from the beginning that we were going to call upon them as the experts in terms of the policy. We know what the policy says, but until you come to test it against a known event, you actually don't know what it means. It's like any contract. You read it and you understand it until you have to apply it, and then you don't realise how many shades of grey. Can I say shades of grey here? Yes. How many shades of grey there are in a contractual relationship. It is not what you think it is at first reading. So we had the consultants there. The Methodist Church runs a first loss policy, and we're responsible for the first $50,000 of any claim in our own office. So where we want an assessor for our own benefit, we've appointed somebody out of Cerno, and we said to Ansvar at the time, right, we're going to use Cerno as they are now as the assessors, because that's what we've always done. And they said they were happy with that, and that proved to be a very useful relationship. And the other decision we made at the very beginning, which in the end was central and pivotal to the success that we had, was we appointed a professional property manager. We used Arrow, but there are any number of property managers, to do the administration load. We didn't employ any more staff in our office to cope with this, but we had umpteen lines of claim running, and we needed somebody to take over the administration of that, somebody that had the contact with the engineers, with the building companies, with the trades, with the local authority, which we didn't have, and we found that hugely important. And that was central in the way that we were able to take our claim forward. Any road has bumps, and if you're in Christchurch, you get more bumps than anywhere else. I was talking to an engineer on the plane flying up this morning, and he's in charge of sewer and infrastructure recovery, and he was telling me that we can expect bumps on the roads in Christchurch for a long time to come. So these are some of the bumps that we had. Ongoing shakes, they didn't stop. They haven't occurred lately. It's moved up the line towards you. But ongoing shakes for those first 18 months were a constant problem. We now accept that New Zealand is one random web of fault lines. You'll be pleased to know that since 9 o'clock yesterday morning, GeoNet have recorded 16 quakes, only 9 of which have been tied up with the Cook Strait fault line. The rest of them have been scattered around New Zealand, and the biggest was 4.1 on the Richter scale, which happily was west of Te Anau. Now the problem with earthquakes is you don't know where they're going to hit, and it's that lovely amalgam of severity and built up area that gives you the problems, vis-a-vis the lines that David showed you before. As we went forward, we needed to review and resolve what buildings remain safe to use. As the earthquakes went on, we had to go back in again and again and again to the ones that were open. And we had an earthquake on the 23rd of December 2011, and I closed 3 churches that night, and they couldn't use them for Christmas service on Christmas Day. I had several parishioners come in and remove the Christmas cards they had sent into our office in the new year. In the end, somebody has to stand up and take responsibility. And if you can't do that, then you can't be in the job. But somebody has to be able to say, on the balance of probabilities, because we couldn't get professional engineers out, I have got to say whether you can go on using these properties or not, and you've got to make the decisions that you think are right, even if they object to them. As I said before, our head office was inside the cordon for 15 months, and we've now lost it forever because we've had to sell it to Sarah as part of, Sarah is the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, as part of the new compressed central city. It's part of the green frame, which will be turned into gardens and play centres and other bits and pieces. So we're now trying to rehouse our office. Finding commercial land is difficult. I don't want to take our staff back into the centre of town. The centre of Christchurch will be a building site for the next generation.
Move to Wellington.
There are a lot of reasons we won't do that, the Crusaders being only one of them. But on the building block that we're in, there were 38, 40 buildings on that block. After the earthquake and the demolition, there were 3 left. The only thing that you see when you drive into our building at the moment is grit. It is not an environment you want to take staff into. We will build something for them, but finding somewhere to go is proving quite challenging. There are different types of bumps. These are the bureaucratic bumps. The Christchurch City Council has had huge bad press, most of which they deserve. I need to go back to the very beginning. I meant to say after I brought the greetings from the church leaders that the views expressed in this presentation are entirely my own. I've got it written down, I just forgot to say it. These are not the views of the church, these are my own views. I think the City Council is getting largely what it deserves. We had major problem with the council when we came to look at repair and strengthening, telling us they wanted 67%. But then in the end, I think in quite a weak need way, they took a case to the High Court, and it was proven that under the Building Act they could only go to 34%. As a building owner, when you've got the local authority telling you that they really strongly urge and recommend you to go to 67, and your insurer is saying we're only paying to 33, and you want to get it done, where do you go? Because if you go to 33, you get your consent. But have you actually done what you should? Because if anything happens in the future, the local authority can say, well, we told you. We said, we recommend you go to 67. It put, I think, building owners in an invidious position. And the statements that have come out of the Minister in the last couple of days do nothing to help property owners in the long term. We've had slowness in responding to consents, especially where heritage properties are involved. I'm afraid I have a hugely jaundiced view of Historic Places Trust, and I say these opinions are mine, not the church's. I don't believe that they are helpful to anybody with heritage property. I think that if you own a property that is registered under the HBT or with the local authority, there is a huge transfer of value from the property owner to the public. in whatever form you may consider the public. But if they took the property off us for road widening, they would compensate us. They don't, they leave the title in our name, but they emasculate the rights of the property owner. And there is no compensation for that. And I think that is theft by statute. Again, I repeat that these are my views, not the views of the church. HBT, as is their statutory authority, want to see buildings maintained, retained and repaired. But there is an economic cost to that which they are unable to meaningfully contribute towards, and our insurers quite properly will take the view of economic consideration, and they have settled with us for replacement, not restoration, and that is entirely the way the policy was to work. The other group that has got very bad press and I think deserves every minute of it is EQC. They were overwhelmed when it happened. They've had 60 years to prepare for it, and when it happened they weren't there, in my view. We notified 106 notifications of domestic claim, some properties 3 and 4 times. My staff were spending all day on the telephone getting through to the EQC call centre to get the progress on a claim for a building. We get to the end of that inquiry and they'd say, now can we go on to so-and-so property? No, they said, you're only entitled as an owner to 1 property per telephone call. Back to dialing up again, going through all the palaver, proving who we were. And we were on our bended knees to the EQC to appoint a case manager who understood who, as a building owner, we were and who could respond to our inquiries. It took us 18 months to get a case manager. We did finally get one. It proved very successful to the point where they said, oh, well, if you can manage claims of this magnitude this well, here are another 5. And he then got Housing Corporation in New Zealand, all of their claims, and we just dropped off the radar again. It is very, very difficult. We're getting there slowly, but it's difficult. I think that there is an unnecessary division between the Commission and insurers. It would have seemed logical that the EQC should treat itself like a reinsurer and leave the insurance companies to do the assessing and report back to EQC and say, here is what we assessed this building at. David, I didn't know you were here. Good afternoon. We love our insurance company. A lot of the trauma that property owners and Christchurch residential property owners have gone through has been caused by trying to relate to 2 separate organisations. If they could have dealt with their insurance company and then let the insurance company and EQC work the way a reinsurer works, life would have been so much simpler. But for whatever reason, it was decided that EQC would paddle its own canoe. And I think that caused huge, and continues to cause, huge heartache and confusion. The other issue, and this did not relate to our insurers by any stretch of the imagination, but some took a very combative and legalistic view. I think at the beginning they were much more open to solutions, but then when the reinsurers became involved, they got extremely hard-nosed about life. And I guess as the dollars clock up, you can see why that would be. But it has done them no good, I think, in the long term. I think anybody that can quote Winston Churchill knows they're on the right road to recovery. And I use this in a presentation to the Christchurch Synod. We're not at the end, we're not even at the beginning of the end, but at least we've got to the end of the beginning. And that is important because it means we can start to move forward. So this is where the crossroads in the journey, I think, really come in. It took us 26 months to resolve our claims with our insurer, which was Ansvar, or NZ Ltd. And that, as I said, totaled about $43.5 million. Our claims with UQC would be lucky to be more than $1.2 million, and we have not settled more than 2 of them. Now, there is something manifestly wrong in those calculations. I can't explain the solution. All I can do is tell you the problem. And as I said before, we're trying to rebuild our national office. On the journey, we start looking at what's around the corner. In the local context, which is the Central South Island Synod, we have the money, so what do we do? What do we build? I keep telling them to think of themselves like a McDonald's. How many McDonald's outlets do you need for the number you're trying to service? It's not a view that the church takes kindly to. But there has to be some proper capital investment basis for the number of parishioners you're trying to service. So what's the correct size of a parish? What's the correct location of a parish? Status quo is not the answer, because Christchurch rebuilt is not Christchurch pre-earthquake. The city has moved significantly. There are hard questions of parish viability and amalgamation. Everybody wants to be where they were before, quite understandably. There are ethical questions about transferring central city parish insurance monies, because we can under Methodist law, and using that money to seed a new parish in one of the new areas which is being resettled following the earthquake. But from a church perspective, from a mission perspective, that to us seems to be a logical thing to do. But there are certainly some hard questions. We employed a strategist to come in and try and help the church understand what a correct strategy should be in respect of the recovery. And we have an almost final report which will be presented to Synod next Tuesday evening. And I understand that will recommend quite significant changes and amalgamations. It also, in a Methodist context, is a little bit more difficult because we are partners in a number of union parishes, particularly with the Presbyterian Church. And that brings its own particular difficulties, not dealing with the Presbyterians, but the different drivers for the different denominations and the relationships with adjoining parishes are different. If there is not a Methodist parish but there is a Presbyterian parish, just how that comes together. So that can be a little problematic at times. On a national basis, we started a seismic review of all of our non-domestic church-owned properties, and we went for IEP reports, which are full of challenges and are conservative, but they still seem to be, to us, the best triage means of reviewing the basic structural strength of a large number of properties in a very short period of time. And Kit, I know, will talk about his views on that. The first tranche we did was New Zealand south of Huntly. We did that to prove to Auckland that there was a part of the country below the Bombay Hills, but that was also the area that the Earthquake Commission saw as its area of greatest concern, because it was generally the area of the greatest seismic risk. The first tranche was completed in May. Beckers did the work for us on a national basis, and a significant number of our properties have proven to come in at less than 34% of new building standard. Not really surprising. It's a function of the age of the properties as much as anything else. We had about 20 that were sufficiently uncertain that we've closed them until we get a better handle on their future. But those that are less than 34%, our engineers have said that they don't believe there are any significant seismic risks involved in the properties, and they think they're safe to go on using them while we go through and do some more work. The church has a view that if we're going to strengthen, we'll strengthen to 67%. Now, whether that will survive the announcements of yesterday, I don't know. We have our annual conference in October of this year, and I think that we will get a significant amount of argument as to just what the level should be that we reach for. Parishes are pushing back at the cost, but then some parishes cannot afford the cost of seismic strengthening, whether we're going to 33% or 67%, and that, I'm afraid, is a position of fact. I'm not sure what the position is in the Catholic Diocese, but a number of our parishes are not as financially secure as they have been. It's a representation of falling rolls. So the outstanding issues as we see them: the future of listed property of the sub-code. I don't want to bag the HBT continuously, but that normally is property that's archaic in fit out and usefulness. And in provincial New Zealand, we have a large number of these properties. They are listed because they're important in the local scheme of things. They might be listed on the local authority register, not Historic Places Trust, but they are nevertheless protected by some form of listing. And for us, as a property owner trying to rationalise and review, that is extremely difficult. If anybody wants to buy an Oamaru stone 600-seat church in Waimate, I would be very pleased to talk to you. We've got the resolution of perceived safety of community risk against the likelihood of recurrence of the earthquakes. We talked about this in the introduction, but the timing of earthquakes. The Wellington shake on the 21st of July at 6.5%. If the centre of that quake had not been 20 k's back towards Seddon, but had been 10 k's further north, the damage in Wellington would have been hugely different. Now, if you can tell me why it was where it was and not 10 k's further north, you're a better man than me, because you don't know where on that fault line that earthquake is going to come. I believe that if you talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And one of the questions that we have put back to the Methodist Church is, can an organisation committed to the pastoral care of people have them in buildings which it knows to be substandard, subcode? Now, I think that is not an easy question to answer, but I believe that there is a reasonably self-evident outcome if you think about it at a deep level. I'm told that at least one firm of brokers has published a paper saying that if you as an employer have people in a building that you know to be sub-code, i.e. seismic strength below 33% of new building standard, and they suffer, your staff suffer injury because of that, you would be considered to be in breach of the current health and safety and employment regulations. And they're also saying that they don't believe in that case the public liability cover that exists would protect the owners of the property. Now, I suggest to you that is a considerable worry. If that position is correct, I've sent the paper out to the President's Church's legal advisor for an opinion. But that, I suggest, is a real concern as the owner of a number of properties that we now know through the IEP have a seismic code below 34%, having people in those buildings when you're aware of that. And that is something else that we're going to have to grapple with. I appeared before the Canterbury Commission into the earthquakes on the collapse of Durham Street and the loss of the 3 lives there. I never ever want to do that again, ever. I'm therefore much more conservative in the way that I see us using our buildings than probably some. To sit there for an hour and a half as I was while I was cross-examined on why we thought it was safe to have people in that building, even though we had a consent from the council to do it, where you had the families of the 3 men who died about the distance where the cameras are, listening to your answer, was not a pleasant experience, and I don't ever want to do that again. Therefore, I really struggle with the position that Morris Williamson has announced. I think that I don't understand how we can have gone through what we've gone through and lengthen the period of time that owners have to bring their buildings up to code. To me, it's counterintuitive. I do not understand. Maybe I haven't understood what he's told us, but as I understand what he's told us, to me it seems counterintuitive. We've had to bring in new insurance arrangements. You all know that Ansvar withdrew their office from New Zealand, and in association with the All Churches Bureau, we have placed our cover as part of a cooperative. The Methodist Church did something which has not been done by the other denominations. We made it mandatory that our parishes continue to insure for earthquake cover throughout the country. We strike one national premium because of the way we do our insurances, so you pay the same rate in Dunedin as you pay in Wellington, as you pay in Auckland. And it's part of the connexional family arrangement that we look to maintain. And we have said no, everybody will insure for full earthquake. Our claim, when it was settled, was around 100 times the premium that we paid for earthquake cover in the 2009-2010 renewal. Our claim is about 60 times what we paid for our earthquake cover in the current 2013 renewal. If we don't pay that premium, I believe that we're betting that we're not going to have another major earthquake claim in the next 60 years. Given the history of New Zealand, I don't think I want to take that bet. The question is not whether there will be earthquakes. The question will be where those earthquakes will strike and how dense the buildings are above them. And I am not prepared to recommend to my employers that we should move away from that cover. So we've moved on from the Crossroads. We are a reasonable distance down the road to the next corner, but as I said with the quote from Churchill, we're really only at the end of the beginning. We probably have 4 or 5 years more work before we can actually say we have got to the position on that J curve, which got us back to where we are sort of normal relations. Thank you for listening.